Have you ever wondered what people hide behind closed doors? What secrets live in the homes that look perfect from the outside? We pass by beautiful houses every day. We see families that seem to have it all. But sometimes the most polished surfaces conceal the deepest cracks. And sometimes the people we dismiss, the ones we barely notice, see everything. Today, we're exploring a story that asks us to reconsider our assumptions about power, judgment, and survival. The Housemaid, written by Freida McFadden, is a psychological thriller that has captivated millions of readers. But beyond the twists and suspense, this book offers something deeper. It holds up a mirror to how we treat people based on their circumstances. It questions who really holds power in any relationship. And it reminds us that everyone we meet is carrying a story we know nothing about. At the heart of this book is a woman named Millie. She's someone starting over, someone with a complicated past, someone who needs a chance. She takes a job as a live-in housemaid for a wealthy family. The Winchesters appear to have everything: a stunning home, financial security, the kind of life that others envy from afar. But as Millie steps into this world, she quickly realizes that perfection is often a performance, and performances require effort to maintain. What makes this story so compelling is not just what happens, but what it reveals about human nature. We live in a world obsessed with appearances. We curate our lives for public consumption. We hide our struggles behind smiles and polished Instagram posts. We judge people by their job titles, their addresses, their outward success. But this book challenges that entire framework. It asks, what if the person you underestimate is actually the one who sees you most clearly? Think about the people who work in the background of your life. The person who cleans your office, the driver who takes you home, the server who brings your coffee. How often do we really see them? How often do we consider their intelligence, their resilience, their full humanity? We tend to look past them, as if their role defines their entire existence. But every person in a service position is a complete human being with dreams, fears, histories, and capabilities that might surprise us. The housemaid explores this dynamic with unflinching honesty. Millie enters a household where she is immediately treated as less than. She endures condescension, cruelty, and manipulation. She's expected to be grateful, quiet, and invisible. And at first, it seems like she has no choice but to accept this treatment. After all, she needs the job. She needs the stability. She has limited options. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. What looks like powerlessness might actually be strategy. What appears to be submission might be survival, and what seems like weakness might be the most dangerous kind of strength. We often underestimate people who have been through hardship. We assume that struggle leaves people broken or diminished, but the opposite can be true. People who have survived difficult circumstances often develop skills the rest of us never needed to learn. They become observers. They learn to read people, to anticipate danger, to adapt quickly. They understand systems from the bottom up. They know how to be patient, how to wait, how to turn disadvantage into leverage. This book also forces us to examine the concept of the perfect family. From the outside, the Winchesters seem to have achieved the dream. But wealth doesn't cure unhappiness. A beautiful home doesn't guarantee a healthy relationship. Status doesn't protect you from cruelty, jealousy, or control. In fact, sometimes privilege enables toxic behavior because it shields people from consequences. When you have money and social standing, it becomes easier to hurt others without facing accountability. One of the most powerful themes in The Housemaid is how we construct narratives about people based on limited information. We create stories in our heads about who people are, what they deserve, why they're in the situations they're in. We judge quickly and confidently, but our judgments are almost always incomplete. We don't know what someone has survived. We don't know what choices they faced. We don't know what they're protecting or who they're trying to become. Every person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. The relationship between employer and employee in this story becomes a study in power dynamics. On the surface, it seems obvious who holds the power. The person who pays has authority over the person who is paid, but power is more complicated than that. Information is power, proximity is power, being underestimated is power. When people dismiss you, they stop guarding themselves around you. They reveal things they shouldn't. They become careless, and that carelessness can be costly. This story resonates so deeply with modern readers because many of us have experienced what it feels like to be undervalued. Maybe you've been in a job where people spoke down to you. Maybe you've been in a relationship where someone tried to control you. Maybe you've been dismissed because of your age, your background, your gender, or your circumstances. That feeling of being invisible, or worse, of being visible only as something to be used, stays with you. It shapes how you see the world. And sometimes, it shapes how you respond when you finally have the chance. But The Housemaid isn't just about revenge or justice. It's about the masks we all wear. Every character in this story is performing a version of themselves: the perfect wife, the successful husband, the grateful employee. We all do this to some degree. We present the version of ourselves that we think will keep us safe, loved, or respected. But what happens when those masks slip? What happens when the person we've been pretending to be can no longer contain who we really are? There's something both frightening and liberating about that question. The idea that we might not truly know the people closest to us, that the person sleeping next to us, working beside us, or living in our home might be carrying secrets that would change everything. It's unsettling, but it's also a reminder to approach others with more humility and curiosity, to recognize that every human being contains multitudes. The book also explores the psychology of survival. When you've been pushed to your limits, when you've lost everything, when you've been judged and cast aside by society, something shifts inside you. You develop a different relationship with fear, with rules, with what's acceptable. Not everyone who has been hurt becomes bitter or cruel, but everyone who has truly suffered gains a new perspective on what matters and what doesn't. They learn what they're capable of. And sometimes, that knowledge is the most powerful thing they possess. Another layer to this story is the question of who deserves sympathy. We're conditioned to sympathize with certain people based on their circumstances or presentation. We feel for the person in the beautiful house who seems to have everything. We assume their problems are valid because they're relatable to us. But what about the person whose problems are messier, whose past is more complicated, whose choices don't fit neatly into our moral framework? Do they deserve less compassion? The Housemaid challenges us to examine our biases about who gets to be the hero and who gets labeled as the villain. In our everyday lives, we rarely consider how our actions impact the people with less power than us. We might be curt with someone because we're having a bad day, not thinking about how they have no choice but to absorb our frustration. We might make assumptions about someone's intelligence or capability based on their role. We might treat service workers as if they're part of the furniture rather than human beings worthy of basic respect. This book is a reminder that every interaction matters, that the way we treat people when we think it doesn't matter is actually when it matters most. The psychological tension in The Housemaid works because it taps into primal fears: the fear of not being safe in your own home, the fear that someone is watching you, knowing things about you, waiting for the right moment, the fear that your carefully constructed life could unravel. But beneath that surface-level tension is something more profound. It's the fear that we've been wrong about something fundamental, that our judgment has failed us, that we've hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and that there might be consequences. This story also speaks to anyone who has ever felt trapped, trapped in a job, trapped in a relationship, trapped by circumstances or choices made long ago. That feeling of having no good options, only various degrees of bad ones. When you're in that position, survival becomes creative. You start thinking in ways you never had to before. You become strategic out of necessity. And sometimes you discover capabilities within yourself that surprise even you. What makes The Housemaid particularly relevant today is how it captures the growing awareness of inequality and power imbalance in our society. We're living in a time when many people are questioning systems that have existed for generations. We're asking why some people have so much while others have so little. We're examining how wealth and status protect some people from accountability while others face harsh judgment for far less. This book sits right at that intersection. It doesn't preach or lecture. It simply shows us a world where those imbalances exist, and then asks, what happens when the person at the bottom refuses to stay there? The craft of this story, the way it unfolds, reminds us that things are rarely what they seem, that first impressions mislead us, that the full picture only emerges over time, and even then, we might be missing crucial pieces. This is true in fiction, but it's also true in life. How often have you discovered that someone you thought you knew was completely different than you imagined? How often has a situation that seemed simple turned out to be layered and complex? We live in a world that demands quick judgments, but wisdom requires patience and nuance. There's also something deeply satisfying about a story where the underestimated person proves everyone wrong, not through luck or magic, but through intelligence, planning, and will. We root for those characters because most of us have felt underestimated at some point. We know what it's like when people don't see our potential or value. We know the frustration of being dismissed or overlooked. So when we encounter a character who refuses to be defined by others' limitations, who refuses to accept the role assigned to them, something in us responds. It's not just entertainment, it's validation. The housemaid ultimately asks us to reconsider our relationship with judgment itself. We judge people constantly. It's how we make sense of the world. But our judgments are based on incomplete information, shaped by our biases and limited perspectives. When we judge someone as weak, we might be missing their strategic patience. When we judge someone as simple, we might be overlooking their intelligence. When we judge someone as defeated, we might be underestimating their resilience. The people we dismiss might be the ones who see us most clearly, and that should make us think twice about how we treat everyone who faces us. As this story comes to its conclusion, what stays with you isn't just the plot twists or the suspense. It's the questions it raises. Questions about power, dignity, judgment, and survival. Questions about who we are when no one is watching versus who we pretend to be. Questions about what we're capable of when pushed to our limits. These are the questions that make a thriller more than just entertainment. They're what transform a page-turner into something that lingers in your mind long after you finish reading. So what can we take from this? Perhaps it's a reminder to look more carefully at the people around us, to treat everyone with basic dignity, not because of what they can do for us, but because they're human beings deserving of respect. Perhaps it's a lesson about humility, about recognizing that we never have the full story about anyone. Perhaps it's about understanding that survival takes many forms, and that strength isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who know how to wait, observe, and act when the moment is right. The housemaid invites us to examine our own lives, the masks we wear, the judgments we make, the assumptions we carry, the power we hold and how we use it. It asks us to be more aware, more compassionate, more careful, because we never truly know what someone else has been through or what they're capable of becoming. And that uncertainty, while sometimes unsettling, is also what makes human connection both mysterious and meaningful. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to Classic Books Explained for more timeless ideas. Take a moment today to really see someone you usually overlook, to question a judgment you've been carrying, to recognize your own strength, even when others fail to see it. Because every one of us is more complex, more capable, and more worthy than we sometimes allow ourselves to believe.